Today I'm joined by Randi Barshack, Senior Vice President of Marketing of Rollworks. Randi, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Declan.
So just a quick one really. So for those who are not familiar with Rollworks, could you tell us a little bit about the company and your position in the market?
Sure. So Rollworks is a provider of an ABM platform for B2B businesses. A few things about Rollworks are that first and foremost, we feel very strongly that ABM is a strategy that should and could and should be embraced by all types of B2B marketers. So we're on a very definitive mission of democratizing access to ABM. And to that means we have a full array of packages for our solution. The only solution that, the only provider that has a sub $1,000 per month solution where we start and then go all the way up to larger enterprise solutions for larger organizations. As part of that strategy, we also have a very, very strong partner first approach. So we're partnered with all leading vendors for everything from marketing automation systems to CRMs to intent providers, and have very strong investment in our partner ecosystem, enabling us ultimately, Declan, to bring best of breed to the customers that we serve. And then finally, for some of you that have been following Rollworks, we actually are part of the Next Roll group, which is the latest iteration of a company that was formerly known as AdRoll. So what that means for us is that we have very, very strong advertising infrastructure backbone that powers our B2B solution. And what that means is while we have very strong solutions about identifying target accounts we're able to leverage a decade plus of work on machine learning and AI that enables the identification of great targets, and then the infrastructure for activation that gives you by far the largest reach of any provider out there. And then of course we have a tremendous investment in our ability to measure those solutions. So we're really proud of the backbone that enables for fantastic digital activation within our customer base. So that's a little bit about Rollworks. We're headquartered in San Francisco, but have people all over the world. And I got my San Francisco backdrop for all of you this morning, so you can see a little bit of our city.
Very, very jealous.
We're the window pane.
Very, very jealous there, Randi, of your view. So that's an interesting point, actually. Obviously, we've seen an explosion over the last few years of ABM martech. Well, martech in general, obviously ABM martech in particular. Do you think that's all good news?
I think the right answer would be yes. The correct answer would be no. And by that I mean quite frankly, I do not come from the MarTech world. I'm a serial head of marketing at a variety of companies in a variety of industries. So quite frankly, before I became well acquainted with Rollworks, I was a little adverse to ABM because it was so full of hype and buzzwords that in many ways, I feel like the industry's co-opted it to mean whatever is self-serving for each vendor. And in that, the real essence throughout the industry of what ABM is can tend to get lost, right? So in that regard, I wish sometimes, not all the time, that the term ABM weren't as hot as it were, but the concepts of ABM were where people were focused. And that's on my own personal journey, how I fell in love with what we do was by sort of not focusing on the hype and the buzzword, but really looking at what ABM is. Many, many companies that I would never describe as ABM are, will have on their website ABM provider, and they're not doing anything anywhere near what I would define as ABM. So really ABM is about marketing and sales teams working together to identify their target accounts. Another belief that we have at Rollworks is that means a robust set of accounts, not a very limited amount of accounts. So sometimes ABM people will say, well, we have a list of 50 named accounts, and we're going to invite them all to dinner and send them expensive bottles of wine. And so we've checked our ABM list. But there's still clearly lots of companies that are being targeted in marketing campaigns and in demand gen efforts. And it's really just sort of another approach to named account strategy, which has been around for years and years. So at its essence, to me, ABM is data-driven, and I don't throw that term around lightly. What I mean is that there's an objective data set of your target account list, tiered. So some of them might require or warrant, rather, hand-holding expensive gifts, dinners when we can go back to having them. Others, maybe a second tier, are very, very good prospects, but you might not have the budget or time to handhold them in that way. But they should definitely be where you're investing some dollars and some efforts. And then, other tiers where they're on your target account list, and maybe you do a little bit more fishing to see when they nibble at the bait, because they're going to be a good catch, but marketing needs to invest kind of lower cost dollars, but some to attract them. And then you can adjust as your budget adjusts as you become more successful. But the most important thing is that that list needs to live in a place where both marketing and sales are activating and running their day-to-day activities against that core list. Whereas, again, I would say the old ABM or target accounts, named account strategy is there would be an Excel spreadsheet somewhere that was displayed at sales kickoff, and then it kind of it's somewhere on the server. No one can ever find it until you're having, you buy a box at a baseball game or football match in your case, and you're sort of like looking for that. Where's that named account list? But it's not in your day-to-day strategies. And I think that's a very important difference in terms of, in my mind, what is really an ABM strategy versus what is just the same named account strategy where there's a list floating around that you pull out from time to time for certain activities.
Yeah, and linked to that point, actually, do you see with Rollworks and with the kind of the companies you work with, do you see successful ABM programs very much linked to where there is a C-suite engagement, where there is an executive engagement in the program?
To a certain degree, yes. To a certain degree, you can, an ABM strategy can be part of what just enables a marketing team to focus on accounts that are going to be higher value. And I guess in theory, you can do that without C-suite buy-in. The more important thing is that there's alignment with sales. Again, ABM can be quite successful if it's just a marketing play, thus account-based marketing. But where it's really going to kick in is where that identification is shared by marketing and sales teams. So marketing and sales are prioritizing the same accounts in the same way. And you have a very, very orchestrated go-to-market play where marketing knows when they're taking the lead, and then sales knows, or primarily your SDRs, when they're taking the lead. And then throughout the process, there's an understanding of not where leads are, but where accounts are. So then as accounts move down funnel, you have your account leads or your sellers that are very aware of everything that's touching the account. And so they have a bird's eye view, per se, of what's happening at the account. The reason I say the C-suite might not need to know is if your marketing and sales teams are aligned, your C-suite will see it in success and they'll see a more efficient go-to-market motion. It would be nice if they know that that's due to ABM efforts, particularly if it's Rollworks that they're using, but it's more important in my mind that the sales and marketing teams are the ones that understand how that beautiful sausage is made and what's enabling them to be more focused and more efficient. And then the success, in my opinion, speaks for itself.
And Randy, what do you see the future like for ABM? What does ABM 2020 and beyond look like for you?
ABM 2020. I think honestly, Declan, you know, there's a big conversation that we have often at Rollworks, and I'm sure you have with your clients, which is, are leads dead? Is it only ABM? We're big believers in ABM because, you know, it is more efficient. And it helps you prioritize. And those are, you know, time and resources are always what we are lacking, right? But, you know, the time, people, and money, and ABM helps you to focus on that. But the channels don't all necessarily align with that. So, you know, back 6 months ago when you were going to an event, sure, by nature of what the event is, you're curating an audience, but you can't control the traffic flowing by your booth and say, I only want people on my targeted account list coming to my booth. So there are channels that are going to be lead focused, but as we become more digital, even things like that will, you know, as badges become RFID enabled and we all have digital fingerprints, our ability to identify people before we engage and know where they're coming from and what account they're associated with and what their role is will only grow. So I do believe there'll be a shifting, right? That there won't, we will still continue, you know, it doesn't cost me a lot to send an email to a broader audience. And if people are interested and respond, you might look at who they are and decide whether you want to follow up or not. But even recently, we're seeing with things like content syndication, we can give the syndicators a list of our target accounts and focus only on the prospects that are coming from our target account list, so that we're not inundating our SDRs with a broad list of people that were really interested in our white paper, but actually aren't good prospects worth the time to follow up on, right? So over time, I do believe the channels will shift and our ability to digitally identify people will increase over time. And our ability to understand what a qualified target account is and our ability to score that will also only increase. So I do believe it is the future, and we'll see a shift. But I don't think the market or the industry is there right now. I think right now ABM is a fantastic complement to the solutions that you're using, and over time we'll see it becoming more and more a critical part of your strategy, and then I believe in the not too distant future the core part of your strategy.
Yeah, and just talking, you've mentioned, you know, what's been happening over the last few months, and what surprised you perhaps in terms of your go-to-market strategy? What's kind of surprised you that's worked, and perhaps things that haven't worked? What kind of shift has there been in how you've been going to market over the course of the last 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, that's the big question. You know, clearly there's obvious things. We had a very, very robust event season planned for the spring. It literally went away overnight, you know, and suddenly we went from, you know, I don't remember how many events we had in Q2 to none, and now clearly the remainder of the year we will not be at events, and most likely into 2021. So at first that was a hiatus on in-person events, and now you have to rethink your entire marketing plan. There's been 2, I would say, silver linings, and I hate to even use that phrase with something that's, you know, impacted the world the way it is, but I'll say silver lining to the shift in marketing, obviously not in a broader sense what's happening in the world. One is that marketers are really forced to flex their digital muscle, and events are so easy in the way that it's person to person. You're talking to people. There's adrenaline flowing, and everyone is able to rally around that. And then and digital is, you know, it's sort of back in the office, rethinking things. Yes, you get amazing reach, and you're fiddling with knobs, but that traditionally you think of the je ne sais quoi as sort of missing from digital, because you don't get that high that you get from events. So it's forced marketers to, if you still are chasing that high, digital is the only place that you're going to get that. And when I say digital, I also mean, you know, things like gifting and physical. So it's forced us to be more creative and embrace the technologies that have been sitting there right in front of our faces, but we really haven't been utilizing. And so we've seen some phenomenal and really creative ways in which marketers, our customers, are utilizing digital that they haven't before. We've seen ABM starting to take on more of an awareness versus purely focused on mid-funnel or demand. We had one customer that actually had their user event canceled I think 2 or 3 weeks before it was scheduled to happen. They changed to a virtual event, and they were able to use a very, very brilliant ABM play to send specific messages to specific accounts that they were both going after as prospects, but also that were customers, with custom landing pages. And they were able to drive tremendous traffic to their online event and just get their brand out there and the awareness. So I think there's been a silver lining in terms of digital's always had its day, but a reappreciation of digital, and flexing some creative muscles. The other thing which I personally, you know, I'm not a very, I wouldn't just describe myself as a very fancy person. I like to be very real. And I think that this has really stripped us bare of many, many pretenses that a lot of marketers feel like they are supposed to have. And I've enjoyed the human contact and connection that oftentimes we feel like our professional persona, you know, shouldn't allow in. And I think people have been much more raw, even in the most professional of circumstances. And it's enabled us to cut through some of the pretense, and realize we always talk about that we're marketing to humans. But even when we say that, B2B marketers still mean human prospects, not humans with dirty dishes in the sink or kids screaming in the background. And I think there's been something really nice about us all being able to drop the pretense a little bit. And I think we all hope, or many of us hope, that aspect of things will stay. So it's been a bit of as a marketer, I find it really refreshing that I can challenge the team to really talk to what's really going on with people and do that in a very raw, real, authentic way.
Yeah, I think I definitely concur, Randy, that I've probably built up some of the kind of nicest, closest relationships over the course of the last 3 or 4 months that I know probably would never have happened otherwise. If it was just relying on pure physical interaction, et cetera, that this kind of rawness, as you describe it, I think is, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, in terms of this kind of ability to build a relationship, because we're all in this together. And I think that commonality, having that common issue that is affecting us all, is driving us to have these more, as you say, more kind of human interactions, and trying with our marketing at least to kind of have that conversation, right?
Yeah. And that's, you know, we miss our in-person events, but I would say even with the in-person events, we wouldn't get there. So hopefully we'll all be in person and be able to celebrate that together soon. But you're right. I think it's enabled us in this very ironic way to get closer to people.
So does that mean, Randy, is there anything that you thought, well, I'm always going to spend money on this, is there something now that you look back and you say, well, do you know what? I'm not going to spend money on that going forward because I actually realized that it was not necessarily a good investment. Even when things return to normal, do you think there's going to be something that you'll say, no, we're not going to do that anymore?
You know, it's funny. I keep asking the question of, will conferences ever come back? I can't tell you honestly. I think it depends on the day. I feel like I'm going through cycles. When things first were canceled, I was more than happy to put my suitcase in the back of the closet and take a bit of a break, and it was very refreshing. Then you kind of miss the interaction, and you know, you start to see cobwebs on your suitcase. I don't even know where my suitcase is these days. He's off doing whatever. And so I think the big question is, how important are in-person events? Are they worth the effort and investment, right? So if I take those same dollars and put them toward digital, what can I do? So I would say I don't think they'll go away. I think right now I'm missing them more than I thought I would. So, you know, at first it was, I never have to go to Vegas or Orlando again. This is awesome, because I've probably been there 100 times each. But I think now we're missing some of that, and some of the, you know, the practicality of meeting people and getting good leads, but also being with peers in settings. We'll see. I do think we'll see digital platforms starting to replicate more of that. And talk to me in a few weeks. We've got a mid-year sales, not a sales kickoff, but sort of a mid-year company-wide event. And that's been a challenge of trying to capture that quality and energy. I think we'll rethink them and scrutinize them in a way that we haven't before, because when you look dollar to dollar, I right now, the catching me this morning, I'm missing them more than I was maybe in April or May. I think they'll come back, but hopefully not with the vengeance where they were, you know, you were running a dozen plus events, you know, a month or a quarter.
No, they're incredibly tiring. You know, both, you know, organizing them and obviously attending them and obviously then the follow-up obviously is the key, isn't it? But they're incredibly tiring and exhausting, and we'll see what happens. Actually, I think the conversations I've had with many people over the course of the last 3 or 4 months is that I think people do agree that they'll come back in some shape or form, but they probably won't come back as they were before.
Yeah.
So just a couple of questions specifically around Rollworks, really. Obviously, there was a big announcement a few months ago from Google that there was, you know, this kind of decommissioning in that announcement. And obviously, a lot of people were kind of, you know, concerned and worried, and obviously it's disappeared, and we're not sure what's happening. But what's your take on that announcement and what the future holds?
That's a good question. So we have an advantage at Rollworks in that because AdRoll has been around for a while, we've seen multiple iterations of standards coming and going, and different ways in which the ongoing conversation about what's digitally possible and then what's digitally acceptable, having you know, existential battles between themselves. So we feel confident that the industry will come together. We're participating in industry conversations about what the next generation and iteration will bring. Unfortunately, I think where you have great technology and great power, you see abuse. And it's always the few that ruin it for the many in terms of where consumers have gotten to the point where, you know, there's an outcry that led to these actions. But particularly in B2B settings, we feel like there are technologies and solutions out there. I'm not, you know, today, I can't tell you exactly what they look like, but there are alternatives that, you know, that give us great confidence that we'll be able to deliver things that will all come out on the other side of this in a better place. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more details and a roadmap to lay in front of you. It's not the end of the internet. Things will change, but you know, we've seen this with browsers before, having, you know, different settings and blockers, and there's ways that things have evolved.
Yeah, and talking about Rollworks, what does the future look like? I mean, is there anything you can share with us? Anything that's going to be coming that we'll be looking forward to seeing over the course of the next few months?
Well, you know, we've had a really, really busy first half. So we've released many new products, features, and partnerships. So I encourage you to sort of see what we've got going on. I'm really excited about a new product that just came out called Sales Insights, which gives sellers the ability to see what accounts are spiking in activity on a daily basis, and that's fed directly into Salesforce. So it doesn't pretend that sellers are going to suddenly get Rollworks accounts and be logging in every day. They're sitting in their Salesforce instance. They're able to see what accounts are spiking. We also have an intent offering that we have in partnership with Bonbora. So you see spikes in engagement as well as deltas in intent and interest in topics that are aligned with your offering. So some of those near real-time capabilities to see how accounts are moving and not just individuals are two of the products I'm really excited about. As well, we've announced numerous partnerships, joining partner programs with the likes of Marketo, HubSpot, Bonbora, and LinkedIn. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're really bullish on the ecosystem. But the last time I looked at the slide, I think there were 8,000 companies on the martech ecosystem slide. So this allows us to curate a little bit more and partner with the solutions that we feel best complement each other. You know, enable to your question earlier, we believe marketing automation platforms are not going anywhere, but an account-based platform needs to be there. To call yourself a contemporary marketer, you need to understand what ABM is. If you don't go, then you need to go one step past the buzzword and really understand it, not just be able to spell it. And you know, complement your marketing automation efforts with something that's ABM. So,
okay, and that leads nicely into the last question. Actually, what advice would you give to any marketeer looking to start an ABM program at their organization? What would be your kind of top 2 or 3 tips for them to think about, and kind of the pitfalls to avoid?
The pitfalls to avoid would be, I hate to say educate yourself because it sounds so exhausting, but enter your search with a bit of skepticism, right? So, and by that, I mean inviting your top 12 prospects to share an expensive dinner is not ABM. That's a named account strategy, and that's been around as long as restaurants have been around, or as long as people have been around. There's probably some caveman analogy of that. So go back to what I talk about of it. It's an orchestrated, data-driven effort that sales and marketing teams share, where accounts are prioritized and your actions and motions, whether that's SDR outreach or whether that's the accounts that you're advertising to digitally, or where you're sending gifts, or who you're advertising to on LinkedIn are engaged, right? So you're where you can control engagement. And again, with Rollworks, even something as broad as display ads now can be laser focused on particular accounts, and particular accounts at particular stages in the journey with particular personas within those accounts. So even things that traditionally you think of as super broad and you can't curate, you can with the digital capabilities, and then measuring at the account-based level. So I would say go a little deeper in understanding it. There are a lot of white papers out there, and some of them will throw you off. So keep asking the questions till you really internalize and understand what it is and what's different. And again, it's something I found myself guilty of, kind of assuming it was named accounts and that was it. And being thrown by, I had this misunderstanding, and I'm not going to name names, but we actually were using a quote unquote ABM vendor at one of my companies, and it wasn't doing what ABM is fully capable of doing. So be skeptical until the light bulb clicks and you really get the power of what it can do. And then experiment, because it's early days, but powerful. And I think it's only going to get better. And, then add it to your resume that you're an ABM marketer and take you right to the top.
That'll give you an extra few zeros on the end of your paycheck. Randy,
Yeah.
great advice. Lovely hearing about ABM and the journey that you've been on there at Rollworks. Thanks so much for spending some time with us this morning over there with that beautiful view of San Francisco. Thank you so much.
It was so great speaking with you.